You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're the show where we try to take all your challenges in your role as a leader and break them down into bite-sized chunks that maybe make better sense. Today, I'm excited to introduce my guest who is going to help us really explore more of the relationship and family side of leadership. And I mean the leader's personal relationships, marriage, family, kids, stepkids, and the whole gamut. And inevitably, we're going to talk a little bit about family-owned small business because that'll be a topic as well. But it's my well-founded belief that when we show up as leaders, we have to show up as a whole person, and whatever you've got going on in your personal life is going to affect what's going on. You may not think it is, you may try to put the mask on and put on a different face or a different cloak, but it's going to be there. So with that said, I'd like to introduce my friend and guest, Mike Haney. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug, I really appreciate the warm welcome, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
You bet. Mike and I had the good fortune, or at least I count a good fortune, of knowing each other through a Houston group of coaches. The group itself has been together almost 30 years. The founder is a likewise friend and colleague who has been at this coaching game probably before coaching became a thing. And he has created a nice community of professionals who come together on a regular basis. And Mike and I met there. We've known each other a bit now, so it's a great opportunity. But Mike, tell the folks a little bit about your background and your journey to get to where you are today.
I really appreciate the question, Doug. And again, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I'm a native Texan, grew up in the Houston area, have an engineering and MBA degrees, spent most of my career as an oil and gas management consultant. So I've been all over the world in that business. I've also developed some new businesses and sold software. Had a business that I started up, sold there. I've more recently developed a mediation and arbitration practice, and then also an executive coaching practice. But is all that on the business side, I've had some good success and some great adventures professionally, but a lot of this has been I've been called to this work because of some of my personal story as well. I was married in 1993. My first marriage ended in 98. I was remarried in 2001, and since then I've realized that there's been a lot of aspects of my family life that have been very important to me that have affected big parts of my life. So after I remarried in 2001, my wife and I started having some challenges, mainly from outside of our marriage. We found we needed to learn some things. So we went into a process of learning, specifically learning by teaching. We started teaching a few courses at our church about how to build better single-parent families because we were a step family at the time. And so since then, we've spoken on larger stages and conferences, et cetera, and my wife has gone on to get her professional LPC license. She's a therapist and does a lot of work in this area. So she and I have been coaches for step families since 2006. So I've been doing that work formally and informally since then. So again, it's been an interesting journey for us, and I feel like I've learned a lot. More recently, I've developed more of an offering to help mainly professional men address some of these challenges that come between the intersection of family and business and the lives that we lead. So happy to be here today.
Yeah. Well, you touched on a number of things that I certainly relate to and empathize with myself, having gone through divorce and tried to create a blended family and all the challenges that can come with that. It is a topic, and when I think about this, you still look at the sad statistic globally, or at least here in the U.S. Is it still about 50% divorce rate?
Yeah, it's challenging, and again, how you count it and all that kind of good stuff is always a bit of a variable. But yes, it's still a very challenging problem that folks face, and as I said, I face it as well myself, my own personal life, and again, I got to say from the very beginning, I didn't have all the answers. I made a ton of mistakes in my life as both as a husband and a father, and trying to figure out how to address those has been a continuous journey. And one thing that I would like to share with folks that I talk to in your audience is that there is hope. You can learn the skills that you need to be more proactive in this area, more intentional, and really find a way to actually grow from these experiences that can be very challenging.
Agreed. And as the famous saying goes, there's no manual on parenthood. And I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
any of us can attest to the fact when that first new baby comes home, you look at it and you go, "Oh my God, what did I just get into here? And what
Indeed.
am I going to do?" And you hopefully you had some influence by good mentors and sources, other your own parents perhaps, hopefully, and
Yes.
there's ways to gather that knowledge, but like you said, it takes some intentional work sometime to really realize you're either getting ready to err or you did err, and now how do you fix it?
Right, exactly right. No, it's a key area of focus. And one thing that my wife and I have specifically found, if I was to give one nugget of advice to folks in this situation, is to be intentional, to make intentional choices about what you say and what you do. And it's so easy to sort of drift into a situation, or you find yourself angry or frustrated or hurt in some regard. The idea is just to work as well as you can to make intentional choices, to learn about these situations, and then try to apply the learnings in all parts of your life.
Well, amen to that. I cannot disagree. And parallel to that is something that I do talk with all of my leadership clients about is the notion of learn how to respond rather than react.
Indeed. Yes.
And it's a subtle nuance, but some listeners have heard me say it before. The way to think about it is when you go to the doctor, if you're ill, the doctor looks at you, works up something, and gives you maybe a prescription for some medicine. If you react to that medicine, things are getting worse. You got more problems. But if
Right.
you respond to it, you're on your way back to good health. And so much of that applies, I think, in the way we as leaders show up in the moment. We can react to the things going on around us, things an employer, in this case, a spouse or a child, might have said. And if you react to it, you're probably putting another log on that fire that you don't want burning. Whereas if you can respond to it, you can keep the agenda moving forward in a positive way. And, your response comes from a good, well-rooted understanding of who you want to be, what you're trying to accomplish, and where you're trying to go. And as long as you keep those in mind, you can respond to situations rather than react.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there, Doug. I think the key element for me is this learning is a lifelong process, and that means for business, for relationships, for being a husband, for being a father, a family member, friend, anything, right? So one thing that I've learned and I try to communicate is to really have grace and compassion for yourself, right? These are challenging things you're going through. You're in a marriage, if you're in a step family situation, if you're a father, if you're in business, you need to have understanding of what you know and what you don't know, right? And I think that it's important to learn, but it's also important to apply it, right? If learning alone would get us there, then we would just watch a YouTube video or read a textbook and we'd be all happy. But of course, it's all about learning what you need to do and then doing it, right? So I know as a coach, as an advisor, as a consultant, that's really been a satisfying part of my career to help people understand have them identify what they need to do, and then be there and accountable for them as they go through the process of doing it. Because even if it feels too late, even if you feel like the relationship is a bad place, or if you really feel like you screwed up with this child or this stepkid or whatever, and it's never too late to learn, and it's never too late to turn around and try to do and be the person you need to be for that other person.
Right. Well, let's talk about, from the leadership lens, people that are at the head of a household or significant partner in a household, and or I should say, or they do have a role of responsibility at work,
Right.
and these kind of, I call them psycho-emotional things kick in. You've got an eruption or a blow up and a tough patch that you're trying to get through. How often do people then kind of walk out of the house, out of the family situation, try to go to work and make it be okay? It's a burden you've still got on your heart and in your mind, and you're trying to go through your work day, and if you're in leadership, you're trying to steer, guide, and direct those around you, yet you've got this storm going on in your soul, and
Right.
how do you power through that?
It's a great question. And that one I know that I've struggled with, and many folks have struggled with, especially men, as you suggested, because in so many ways the home and work environments can be so different. When we're at work, oftentimes men feel like we're almost on stage or in a battle, or whatever kind of atmosphere your workplace is. That can be very challenging, and you pile on, as you said, Doug, the responsibility of being a leader, a manager, a director, an owner of your business. That makes it even more challenging. You feel you have to be more directive. You have to develop more energy. You have to really make things happen. And sadly, that's true for a lot of folks. And then, of course, that drive home, and you're driving to the driveway, and perhaps you park your car. The moment there is really on you to take a few breaths, to really try to focus on what's going to happen next, because it's really easy for a man to come into his home in the afternoon, evening, and still have all this on his heart, as you suggested. And we may feel like we have a poker face, but oftentimes we don't. The affect we may have of grumpiness, or a little bit of a scowl, or more quiet, etc. You're bringing that into your home, and while it still may be on your mind and on your heart, going back to being intentional. If I can just coach men to be intentional about those transition moments, right? Your wife, your kids, they don't know what's going on at the office necessarily, and it isn't really fair to them for you to sort of try to drop that burden on them. So try to make the intentional choice to be present with them, and try to do as best you can. Put that aside. It's not easy, but again, with practice, it's something that you can get better at, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, the phenomenon does go both ways. Again, I reflect when I was going through my last divorce, it was the home life that was in turmoil, and work was my retreat, my escape. I could get to the office, and there were good things to be done. There were fresh, new, exciting opportunities to be pursued, and there was a team around me that we were all on the same page, wanting to row in the same direction, and that was my escape, was to get to work. And of course, I described it as taking on this whole skin. The skin I had at home, I would peel off and hang on the door and put my work skin on and go to work. And then at night, having to make that reverse trek and change those skins and go deal with it.
Yeah, I like your idea about skin. Another analogy that's helped me is a suit of armor, right? It's not just skin; it's actually a different suit, a different thing. I'm protecting against this wound or attack in certain hours of my day, and a different set at other hours of my day. And it can be a really big challenge for everyone, including men.
Yeah. I have, when this subject comes up from time to time, I often recall a moment I had in my early career banking days. One of our senior HR leaders was a female, and we were in a discussion one day, and I said something about another colleague I knew that was struggling with his home life, and I said, but that doesn't really matter. You know, he's great here at work. And she said, oh, you're wrong. And she said, it does matter. And, you know, how people live their whole life is exactly what we should be aware of and sensitive to in the workplace. And at first I wanted to push back on that. I was kind of still in the mindset that it's none of your business, you know, what I've got going on personally. But over the years, as I've ruminated on that idea, it's an absolute truth, and she was spot on by saying that.
Right.
And I think for me, you know, it's that, is that a story where we're telling ourselves that whichever dimension of our life we've got the struggle in, you know, are we being real if we just say, oh, it doesn't matter?
Right. No, it's a real challenge. I think that all of us try to compartmentalize our lives as best we can, right? And yeah, it's a worthy objective, I suppose. And again, that driveway moment I talked about a few moments ago, that trying to transition from one part of your life to the other is something that is an intentional choice that perhaps could help in these situations. But I think the HR person you mentioned is definitely correct. We overestimate our ability to compartmentalize. We overestimate our ability to turn off the challenges we're facing at home during the 10 o'clock sales call on a Tuesday, or vice versa, right? We didn't get the project, and you know, here it is 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and we're having family dinner, but we're not connected. We're disconnected. We're checking our phone. We're doing other things that are not conducive to that. One thing in particular, I think men have a challenge with here in this compartmentalization piece is something that John Gray calls the cave, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the cave, but it's basically it's a situation how men and women are different. Women are much better at talking, but men often cave to process their feelings, right? So what I mean by the cave is when a man sort of goes off by himself. He's watching sports. He's surfing the internet. He's tinkering in the garage. He's going for a walk. He's playing golf as an example of being in the cave, right? Or some cases working long hours at into the evening at work just to avoid some of the situations. So this is really where men do a lot of their deeper thinking, their processing, they're trying to address some of the challenges they're facing in their life. It's generally a good place for men to be to do this. For whatever reason, our brains are set up that way, much more than women are. However, what men need to communicate with their woman when they sense themselves going into the cave is a very simple message. I'll be back. Because when they go off when a man goes off into the cave and doesn't tell his woman that, his woman doesn't know what's going on. She can't read his mind, and she will follow him into the garage. She will go into she'll sit next to him while the football team is playing, and try to engage, right? And then that not only frustrates her, but it also interrupts his internal mental work that he's doing. So again, I think women often struggle to understand the cave, as men often do, quite frankly. But as you sense yourself as a man going into the cave, I just encourage men to communicate that fact to his wife, and I think that will help her understand. Listen, I'll be back. Give me a couple hours, and we can talk about this some more. So I think that's one thing that's an intentional choice that's helped me for sure.
I think that's a great point, and if I may, I'll share a little bit of a personal story along that line. After I had gone through my last divorce, There was also an event in my life. My mother, who was still alive, was starting to have some medical trouble, and I offered to her, I said, look, I said, I'm now single. I've got this big house. Why don't you just come live with me and let me do a shift here. I don't have any plans immediately to get remarried. There wasn't another woman in my life. It was none of that. And she said, great. So she did. We moved her to my home, and she and I figured out our rhythm and got some things going. And then a couple of years went by, and I did meet someone who is now my wife. But while we were in the dating process, I was working from home, and Susan, my wife, would come over, and my mother was telling her, don't interrupt him. He's working. He gets real upset when you interrupt. And Susan's personality was PS on that. If I need to talk to him, we're going to talk. But she understood and was respectful. And what she would do, she'd stick her head in my office. She said, she would say, do you have a minute?
Right. Good.
And I quickly learned to say, sure, what you got? What's going on? Because, in my rhythm, a lot of different things going on. There might always be an opportunity. But sometimes I would say, give me 10 or give me 20, let me wrap this thing up, and then I'll make it available. But then, the commitment on my part was to, when I said, yes, I'm ready, I needed to be there in her moment. And we've done that ever since, and that was 23 years ago. That all that was going on. So,
Doug, what you're describing there, and again, I'm glad you're able to work that out with Susan. My wife and I have both done a lot of training in various methods. One of which is called John Gottman's 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. I don't know if you've read that book. It's an excellent book, and she and I are both trainers. Certified trainers in that method. But what you're describing there is called a bid for attention. Okay, so your wife, to her credit, was figuring out a way to get some of your attention, and it sounds like a respectful way to do it, right? And she didn't just sort of barge into your office and plop herself down, and when you're in the middle of a conference call or something. I mean, she sounded like she was doing a respectful way to do that. Again, to be intentional with your partner, it's a great thing to sit with her and say, listen, I know things are busy, and I know sometimes you want to get my attention. This is great. Let's work out a way so that you are coordinated on how we do this, right? Sure, if the house is on fire, someone's bleeding, it's a different protocol, but maybe you send me a text, or maybe you say pop your head in, or send me an email, or whatever it is. And it's just the system that you and your wife would have to work out those ways to have those bids for attention. Because if you didn't respond to the bid for attention, or you were annoyed by the bid for attention, then that would cause other problems even before you got to the issue, whatever it was that you wanted to talk about. So another element that I really like to encourage men to think about is something called the emotional bank account, right? And it's something that it makes sense when you think about it, but until you really intentionally think about it in a way to put it together, it's just it can be a foreign concept. Basically, what it is just find a way to make deposits to your wife's emotional bank account, right? And a deposit is things like just a quick word, I love you, hold her hand in public, open. My thing is I do all I can to open my wife's car door. Here, 20 something years in a marriage, I'm always there to open her car door for her, and she really appreciates that. Yeah. Carry stuff for her, little things, right? It really doesn't matter how big a gesture it is. It doesn't have to be, here's a big diamond ring and we're off to Rio de Janeiro on some big trip. The idea is just to make regular and consistent deposits in that emotional bank account, because the most important one, or everything, was tell her that she is beautiful, especially when she doesn't feel that way, and of course tell her that you love her, and just to do that multiple times a day. What's amazing to me, how this has worked well for me personally, and then other men that I coached, is that they find that the friction between the spouses just seems to loosen up so much more, because you're developing a positive balance in a sense in your emotional bank account with her. And yes, there will be moments when you will lose your temper, or you will, not do a chore or whatever. You're making a withdrawal from that bank account. But you want to make sure that it is, at least has a positive balance and growing. And also the way I think about the emotional bank account, and this is something that we've been advising this couple here recently in coaching, is that it kind of comes back to the idea of it's a bank account, not a scorecard. So what this couple was doing is that they, I made I made a nice gesture, and now it's your turn to make a nice gesture. If it's like, it's not, baseball innings or something, or, possessions in a football game. It's basically, yes, tell your wife you love her, and then, an hour or so later, open the door for her, and then, clean up the kitchen, clean your dishes up in the kitchen, or whatever it is. They're small emotional bank account. Don't necessarily be resentful that you didn't get a deposit yourself from her, because it all builds up, and it's something that we really will need to leverage, especially when there are challenging times, when you're angry, she's angry, or there's some other external event in your marriage.
Yeah. So many things in there to think about. And again, sharing a little bit of an anecdotal, again, when Susan and I met, there was the classic moment. We're getting ready to go out somewhere, and she comes out and stands and says, "What do you think about this outfit?" Well, most men think that's a giant tripwire. I'm getting ready to go over the edge, and I'm getting ready to get in trouble.
Right.
And the reality is, on occasion, the honest answer is that's not quite working. It's not your best look.
Right.
But men fall into that trap
Yes.
way too often. But I learned quickly, and Susan helped me understand this. She said, when I ask you that, I need honest input. She said, generally, when I ask you that, I'm sensing I don't have it right yet. I can't think about my collection, and I'm putting this together, and I don't feel that it's right, so give me your opinion. And so I've gotten honest to say, I don't think those two colors go together, or that the length of that one doesn't match the blah blah blah, whatever. I've tried to give her a specific, honest impression when she asked me that question, and she'll say, "Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly the problem I'm struggling with." She said, "Since you see it, I see it. Give me a minute. I'm going to go fix this, and she'll go back and do something else. But it's not this giant eruption. It's not this." But in the learning process for me, I kind of tried to do the guy thing. I said, no, you're fine. That looks good. That looks good, and she goes, "You're lying to me. I don't think it does,"
Right.
And now that was the friction point.
Yes. And I think that was probably made easier, and I would coach other men who are listening to this podcast. It will be made easier to have those sort of honest conversations if you have a good series of deposits in the emotional bank account where you told her that she's beautiful, that you told her that you love her, that you tell her how much you appreciate her, and how well she takes care of herself. And because, again, right or wrong, women tend to spend a lot more time taking care of themselves, and their own personal appearance than men do. And for a variety of reasons, that seems to be the case. And I'm just grateful to be the beneficiary of that, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Right? If I was with a woman who took as perhaps little care of my skin as I do my own skin, well, that might be pretty unfortunate for everyone involved. And so again, I am very grateful for all the effort that my wife puts in to maintain her appearance. And again, I've had similar conversations with her, right? I will be careful in my language, of course, but I'll say, I'm not sure that goes as well as you say in May or whatever. And and to her credit, she does appreciate the honest feedback. If there's a way you as a man can get your relationship with your wife into that particular place, you are making some great progress, and you should be very, very proud of her. Very proud of yourself.
Well, Mike, let's shift gears a little bit. We teased out at the top of the show that we were going to talk a little bit about family-owned businesses. Let's pivot over to that arena. When we do think about the small business that is family-owned, family-run, you
Right.
typically have a founder, and that could be man or woman, doesn't matter. But they've invited others in their either immediate family or extended family to get involved. Uh,
Right.
do you have a short list of cautions or warnings or recommendations on how to optimize that experience?
It's a challenging area for sure, Doug. And I've worked with folks who are in and around family business for many years, and it can be fraught with a lot of tensions. We were coaching a client a few years ago who had very successful professionals. They also had both had inherited some significant resources, including a large ranch down in South Texas, and so they had a lot of things going on, a lot of blessings, of course. But they had two kids, and the challenges that the parents and the children had, even when the kids were adults, still were based upon a lot of things that had happened back when they were kids were young, right? So it's amazing how these then flow into the business decisions that are being made and not being made, right? Because I'm really upset about this that happened when I was 12, and now here you've asked me, I'm 37 now, or whatever it is, and you're asking me to run this new division, and I'm bringing the thing up from 12, right? So again, it's something that's really can be very fraught with challenges, right? Going back to so much of this, though, a big part of the solution is to be intentional about the relationships you have, both within the family members, and then also with the folks who are non-family executives. There must be a nice way to describe those folks, but people who are not family, not related by blood or marriage or anything, but are working in some of these firms. Of course, are very large, and work with a couple of firms right now that are nine figures of revenue, right? Very large organizations that are still 100% family owned, and they're wrestling with how to make sure that their non-family member employees can feel respected, feel connected, feel valued. But then, of course, another element that's often going on or can go on is the family members can be, sort of at least perceived to be benefited by nepotism, right? As you say, let's say it's a founder. Let's say he's a man. He has two or three kids. One or two of them wants to get into business. They do reasonably well. Then the grandkids are involved, and at this point, there's some, the conditions of the grandson growing up are much different than the conditions of the grandfather growing up, shall we say, materially and all the rest. So, sometimes the grandkids will be really difficult to integrate into the business, and then of course the people who work at the business they get really frustrated. They feel like grandson or granddaughter is skipping all these steps, and yeah, he or she was a ski bunny for 2 years after undergrad, and now the person's coming in at 24 and it's been given a oversight of a whole division or something, or whatever the situation is, and it can be very, very tough for everyone to piece that together, right? So again, it's something that requires some intentionality and some tough conversations, right? And I was talking to a friend just last night, talking about how oftentimes these family businesses go from rags to riches back to rags in just 3-4 generations, right? And the stakes are very high, and sometimes it can be tough for the folks involved to see how high those stakes are.
Yeah. Well, again, I'll share the story. My wife and I, after we got married, I had been in the consulting game and helping a couple other national companies build some platforms, and finally I said to Susan, I said, I've done this 3 times now with these other companies. Maybe we ought to pull some money together and just go do it for ourselves. I've kind of figured out how this platform works really well. And so now I know maybe we ought to go do it. And we did. And so we started a privately owned, business, raised some investor equity and
Good.
launched this thing. But one of the things I told her I wanted to do was similar to what we had done at home. I wanted to think of the business in departments or components, and I wanted to have her take control of certain ones, and I was
Yes.
going to be in control of the others. And the rule was, whoever's in control of it gets to make the final decision, and with no challenge, no penalty, just
Mhm.
go with it. And we would consult, of course, but it was dividing like that, and that's the way we ran the company,
Yeah.
and it worked incredibly well
Good.
as far as our ability to. And now this became a 24/7 environment. We would get up in the morning, she'd get dressed, and we'd get in the car together and go to work and work all day, and then get in the car and come home. And
There you go.
so your transition period you talked about wasn't hardly ever happening. It was just a constant flow of things one way or the other. And we would just kind of morph into home life versus work life. But the bottom line is it worked quite well. And it was a page from our at home playbook.
Yes.
We kind of divided things up around the house. And it's like, if there was a thing that had been declared her domain, I didn't want to muck with final decisions. Now, again, she would consult me, but when she made the final decision, it was hers, and I was comfortable with that. And there would be things like in her domains that would come up. She'd ask me a question, and I would fundamentally say, "I don't care." She learned to know that when I said that, I wasn't dismissing it or belittling it. It's just, let me remind you, that's your domain. I don't have a vote there. I don't want to vote. It's yours. I trust you. It's up to you to do.
Right.
And I'll dialogue. I'll talk about it with you all day long if you want to. But I'm not going to persuade a vote one way or the other.
Yeah, no, that's like a really interesting development. Again, that's the intersection between your marriage and your family-owned business, right? And how that transition took place. And it's really interesting to think about. Michelle Weiner Davis has this great book on sort of the 5 phases of marriage, right? And the first one is passion prevails, right? We all remember these moments and can't keep your hands off each other, and it's just wonderful. And those first few weeks, months of the relationship are just really, really special. And then that leads straight to phase 2, which is, what was I thinking? which is a really sad place to be. And I know we've all sort of been there as well. And then, but hopefully that moves to something along the lines of phase 3, which is, everything would be great if my partner changed. And again, a lot of people find themselves stuck there, right? Their marriage there. And then ideally you can get to a place where she also talks about being a detective of your spouse. Sounds like you were a detective of your spouse in that regard, trying to understand, well, what are the ways we can work together? Why is it that you need to do this before we do that, et cetera? So ideally you get to stage 4, which is, that's just the way my partner is. So when you talk about that division of responsibilities in the company and the division of responsibilities in the home, that's the result of a lot of negotiation, arguments, perhaps conversations that you had with her to get to that place, right? And ideally, you could find yourself, hopefully, and I encourage other men to be able to get there as well, stage 5 in this model, which is together at last. You understand what, as much as you can, what your spouse is doing, why they do the things you do, and also why you do the things that you do, right? And it is a constant, in a sense, a journey of learning about yourself and about her, right? Because again, going back to John Gottman's research, I think it's something like 60, 70, 80+% of all marital conflicts are simply never resolved. And whatever they are, maybe she says you should be taller, or she's frustrated that she never liked her mother, or whatever it is, right? So many of these things simply never get resolved, and if you can find yourself in a way of acceptance of that, that makes these things so much easier, both in your home life, and then as you talked about a moment ago, in your business life together. So
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
Well, Mike, we're about up on time. Thank you so much for sitting in. This has been great, and I sure enjoyed the discussion with you.
Yeah, I really did as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Doug. And as I said, I really feel called to help encourage other men to be and to do more. Right? I think we have so much capability and so much ability to become better versions of ourselves. And for me, my message to your listeners is to one of encouragement, right? And just to try to be aware that change is possible, and just to be as intentional as you can be with your wife, with your family, and your business colleagues, and then that's the way to make good things happen.
You bet. Well, tell everybody the best way to get a hold of you, Mike, if they're interested in knowing more.
Thank you for that, Doug. I believe every man needs more courage, right? So I've built a website devoted to that, mancourage.com. It talks about all the things that I work, my work with clients, how I help men in the relationships with their wife, their family, and also in business, in these family business situations we're talking about. So again, I encourage your listeners to take a look there and again, connect with me, and perhaps even have a initial call with me. There'll be links there on that website to really help this exciting and fulfilling work continue. So thank you.
Sounds great. Well, folks, as always, we're going to have those links in our show notes. So click down, check Mike's work out, and feel free to reach out to him. I do want to remind you, we have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives, and please leave us a comment or a note. Any other thoughts or ideas of what you might like to hear on future episodes, just let me know. You can reach out to me on my website, dougthorpe.com. A lot of information, a couple of giveaways and freebies there to check out about your leadership journey. So with that, we're going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.